I started with behaviors and then I expanded that to behaviors and motivators. That very first class, when I ran that, I put them on a wheel and I found that I was the
Really?
problem, not my students. First of all, I think we need to realize that about 95% of our decisions are made prior to you opening your mouth. In other words, my data would show that there is a catalyst that's really immediately responding with an emotion. And that emotion is occurring at about an eighth of a second. You do not have a cognitive thought until a third of a second. In other words, you've already made the decision before you thought about it.
Ron, you've studied quite a bit on cognitive bias and how it shows up in decision making. What advice would you give to sales leaders looking to minimize its effects?
A flood of ideas.
You are listening to the Bestsellers podcast presented by Doug Dvorak, where the focus is elevating your sales game. The Bestsellers podcast, your ultimate destination for winning sales strategies.
Good day, Mission Podcast community. I'm your host and podcast navigator, Doug Dvorak, and I'm excited to bring you inspiring stories from incredible guests. These individuals are on a mission to create remarkable possibilities that not only enhance their own lives, but also make a lasting contribution to the communities and companies they serve. Stay tuned for some truly amazing conversations. My guest today is Dr. Ron Bonstetter. Hi, Ron.
Hello.
All the way from very hot Scottsdale, Arizona, where TTI, or Target Training International, is headquartered. Ron, good to see you. Thanks for making some time for our listeners at Mission Possible. I know you're a very busy executive, but I really enjoyed about 30 days ago visiting TTI and experiencing the awesome Mind Science Center. And really, welcome to the Mission Possible podcast, Ron.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to seeing what kinds of questions you might have. You know, we spent some time here in the lab, but I'm really anxious now to debrief that and unload what you might have to say and what questions you might have.
Great. Thanks, Ron. Well, sort of how I framed today's podcast, Inside the Mind, TTI, or Target Training International's new frontier in neuroscience, and the new TTI Mind Science Center in Scottsdale with Dr. Ron Bonnstetter, who is Vice President of Research and Development at Target Training International. So, Dr. Ron, I'm going to call you Dr. Ron if that's okay with you. We want to get to know you a little better. Ron, you've had a remarkable career blending education, neuroscience, and business. What first sparked your interest in behavioral science and brain research?
I think it probably started early on, where I had people telling me what I couldn't do. At the time, I didn't recognize and didn't realize that I was extremely dyslexic. And
Really?
if you take a look at me, I'm old enough that, of course, that was not a term that went around when I was young. And yet, so I had a self-concept that did not match the reality that was being portrayed and the opportunities that were being portrayed. And so I started to react by deciding that whatever somebody said I couldn't do is what I would do. So early on, there was a neurological component. And by the way, reacting to other people and making your decisions is probably not the best way to live your life. It did accomplish some things for me, but in retrospect, there's always a downside when you're trying to prove other people wrong.
So, Ron, what drew you to your current role as Vice President of Research and Development at TTI, and how has your journey evolved over the years?
That also is a fascinating story. I was a professor at the University of Nebraska for 29 years. When I arrived there, I had just finished my PhD, so I was closer to God than other people.
And you're a Cornhusker, right?
I still have my season tickets, by the way.
No way.
I do. So at any rate, I actually started to teach and it didn't go well. And I had this older brother that was running Target Training International. And so I called him and I said, my teaching is not working. And he said, have you used any of our assessments on your students? And I had not, but he allowed me to do that. And I ran. Then at that point, I started with behaviors and then I expanded that to behaviors and motivators. That very first class, when I ran that, I put them on a wheel and I found that I was the anomaly, not my students. I was the
Really?
problem, not my students.
Wow.
I was off scale at 2 o'clock. I'm an off scale D. All my students were S's and C's with a little I. We were not communicating, and I was not meeting their needs. And so I became so excited about the science of self that I started to teach my students, and in the process, learning about myself. But I actually dedicated a portion of my courses to learning about yourself. Because nowhere in the university, you have 4 years, but you don't really ever learn about self, learn all this other stuff. And that's even true in teacher preparation, which is what I was running. I was running a science education program, and no one took the time to help them. You can't have children teaching children. And that's basically what I had going on. And I was a child myself in that process.
So you have this realization teaching is not going as well as you'd like. In fact, it's not going well at all. And you call your brother up who started Target Training International, and you get these assessments, and it's like a aha moment. And it doesn't say, I'm going to quit teaching. It makes you want to use this science and the data to be better and then teach your students about the science.
Yeah, and of course, being an academic means that you're supposed to do research. And so everybody usually has a research focus that has nothing to do with their teaching. They separate those two. My research was my teaching. So I
Mm.
researched my teaching and I started to write about my own journey. One of those articles led to the National Science Teachers Association, had an application to see if there were outstanding teacher preparation programs. I wrote excitedly about what I was learning about myself and my students. And I ended up early on in my career, the second year, I ended up getting a national award, and it was handed to me by Carl Sagan in Washington um,
Wow. I
for
love
the
Carl
outstanding
Sagan.
teacher preparation program in the nation from science education. So all of a sudden, I had this thing that I was pretty excited about, that was causing people to stand up and say, wait, this is sort of cool. However, I was in a university surrounded by academics. And
Mm.
the one strength that academics have is figuring out what's wrong with something. They seem to live their life that way with, oh, that's a good idea, but let's figure out what's wrong with that idea. So it didn't take very long for somebody to point out that these were self-assessments, and you can say anything you want in a self-assessment. That was their premise. So all of a sudden, again, I decided, somebody is telling me what I can and can't do, and I disagree. I know they work. I mean, I used them, but an N of one and the fact that I knew they work isn't going to sell this to anybody. So
Right.
I needed to be able to sell it to their world, and their world required data. And to make a long story short, I actually started to interview department heads at the Med Center and explaining my issue. And every time I explained it, I got it clear in my own mind as to what I was trying to pull off. And eventually, I was able to connect with Dr. Sengi, who said, I'll tell you what, my residents are really, really poor at patient relationships and questioning skill and bedside manner. If you will work with my residents on those skills, I'll help you understand how to read brain maps and to run
Wow.
EEG. So I spent 4 years working at the Med Center on Tuesdays. As a result of that, I started to really understand where decisions came from. I still didn't have anything that really gave me what I needed, but I was at least learning where to find it. That all changed when my brother then I do believe in serendipity, by the way. I was starting to be frustrated as a professor. And on a Friday, I came home, and it must have been 2010, and I told my wife, this isn't fun anymore. And by the way, I hope all of our listeners realize that life is short and that should be some joy in what we do. It doesn't
Absolutely.
have to be joyful every day, but there better be some joy in what you do. So at any rate, I said, this is not fun anymore. And she said, well, then we need to do something else. So I started thinking that weekend, I want to do something else. What would that be? Serendipity. On Monday, an email comes out from the president and says, we'll give anyone who's a full professor a year's salary to go away because we need to
No.
have cost savings. So
The
I
planets
went
were
that
aligned.
afternoon and signed the papers. I'd already decided on Friday that I was going to do something different. On Tuesday, my brother called, and he did that about once a week. We just talked about research, and he was always interested in my viewpoint on this. And he said, I really need a research division within Target Training International. Have you ever thought about coming down to helping me and join the family business? And I said, I'll be there June 1st. So that's where we got to this point. And now, when I'm here, the goal was to actually have people take the assessments and then gather brain data simultaneously to see if I could match brain activity to the questions. It's called response processing. It led within a year of coming down here to 2 patents, and we were able to actually confirm that I could identify, I literally can fill out the assessment by only looking at your brain activity.
Wow, that is cool. Ron, so we're talking a lot about Target Training International and assessments and DISC, DISC. You had mentioned you're a high D or a dominant, or dominance is one of your prevailing personality styles. Can you unpack for our listeners what DISC is?
Well, DISC is a behavioral assessment that's been around for many, many, many years. And it takes observable behaviors and tries to break those into 4 distinct descriptors that you can be on a continuum between those. You're never one or the other. You're somewhere on a continuum with all 4. They vary, and you can work with me on this too, because there's a little bit of vocabulary that changes between divisions, but dominant, you've talked about. And the dominant really is an individual who is driven with wanting control, power, and recognizing that they have a voice and they want that heard.
Mm-hmm.
We have people that are steady with the S, and they sit back and listen and observe and gather information. They are very, very stable. Might be even another word for it. We have our eyes that are really very extroverted in nature. I think that's the best descriptor I can come up with. An eye. They like to engage, and they think best by verbalizing their thoughts. So what they think usually comes out of their mouth, sometimes simultaneously. But at any rate, they like to engage and be extroverted. Then we have finally the C. And the C are very calculated. They are concerned with accuracy, with quality. They make sure that things are done right in their mind. So they're processing. You see, each of these have a different filter then that they're operating under that comes out in their behaviors.
Fascinating. I've been a Target Training International value-added partner for over 20 years, and my lane is sales training, sales coaching, and we use the behaviors, attitudes, motivators, as well as the sales skills index. And every time that clients, individuals, salespeople, sales leaders take these, they are eerily awed at 90 plus, 93, 95% accuracy, the narrative. That's me. And so it's just incredible. Ron, what has been the most surprising or rewarding discovery you've made in your career at TTI so far?
When we first started to do the correlation between the brain activity and the questions on our surveys, in particular, the behavioral assessment was one of the early ones that we did. And you had to rank order 4 things, the things you were most like down to the things you were least like. And as I analyzed the data, I was finding that I could align what you liked most. About 84% of the time, I could look at the brain and actually get it correct with what you put on paper. And all of a sudden, I had an aha because the percentages were different. When I got to 4, what you dislike, it was 100%. Provided I did not lose the data with an eye blink or some other problem, what you dislike is stronger than what you like. And this became an important component then when you're doing assessments, that what you tell us you're not is more important in many ways than what you tell us you are.
Interesting.
And that, in fact, for TTI, going one step further, if you have people that are listening to this, I think it's absolutely exciting that Bill organized the questions that 3 and 4 tell you your natural style. It's who you really are, comes from 3 and 4. In other words, what you tell us you're not is always going to be more important to you than your adapted styles, which is coming from 1 and 2 of your answers, what you most are like and what you're right below most liked. I don't know. That's maybe going too far down the rabbit hole, but it's fascinating.
Fascinating. So really, a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is DISC and your experience and your research. But I had the high honor and privilege to experience TTI's Mind Science Center. Now I'd like to go inside the TTI Mind Science Center. Let's talk about the new Mind Science Center in Scottsdale. What was the inspiration behind creating this state-of-the-art research lab?
Probably the interaction of myself as an academic and the rest of the world I live in called business, because I was just absolutely excited about all the things I continued to learn from this new protocol, this new paradigm where I could actually see your brain make decisions. And at some point, somebody said, yeah, but you know what? You could actually help individuals with this if you'd create a business model instead of just continuing to dream up exciting experiments to run. And so I was pushed a little bit. And as a result of that, I started to work with my team, and they're absolutely right. There was a business model here, and the business model is that each individual, every one of us, are on a continuum with regard to our awareness of self. And if I could help people become more self aware, then we could actually start working with them to become self regulated. And so they fit together. In other words, it bothers me that somebody's going to tell you how to regulate your activity without ever telling you why. We want to uncover the information that lies below your behaviors. We want to go beyond the symptoms and get to the causes. When I look at your brain, I can see causes. I can see activity that is triggering your behaviors. And that's exciting because I can now show you that. So I'm not giving you a pill, I'm actually giving you insights.
That's fascinating. And I found it fascinating when I was there in the debrief. So, Ron, what is the core mission of the center and how does it aim to change the way we think about leadership and human performance?
I think the core mission is to be available for any individual who wants to move from wherever they are to the next level and to gain abilities and controls that they've never had. And everyone is at a different place on that. So it's not like we're taking everybody from point A to point B. We're taking everyone wherever you are and moving then to the next level up with regard to that. For example, we run a baseline EEG, and you had one. We ran a baseline on you. And from that baseline, the next step would be, here's what we're finding. What are your goals and what are your needs? And we custom design then a program that will help you move in the directions you want to go.
Ron, how is neuroscience being used to enhance traditional behavioral models like DISC and motivators?
Well, the number one step was the original mission, which was response processing. In other words, every time we have new items that are embedded, those are gathered again in my lab where we're having people answer the questions. Simultaneously, we are gathering their brain activity. We've been able, and I've published on this, we've been able to identify 3 or 4 categories of outcome that we get. One is a perfect match. What your brain says and what you put on paper is a perfect match. We also started to realize early on that some of the items that we had, we wanted to make sure people really thought, and so they became reverse items. Tell me what you are by telling me what you're not. In other words, they were double negatives. And the brain was just switching back and forth. It had no clue what to do with that question. They were not good questions. We had another category that's absolutely fascinating. In the literature, I refer to them as socially acceptable answers. The item was so crystal clear as to what the right answer was that you didn't answer what your brain said at all. You answered what you thought somebody would want you to be. And by having this brain activity, we're able to say, oh, that question, yes, look at that. That's too obvious. We have to alter that in some way to make it better. And so we've been able to improve our assessments in ways that no other company can do. Other companies will do an item analysis with quantification. We do that too. Dr. Eric Garrick does an awesome job of helping us with the quantitative component. What I'm doing is more of a qualitative component, and the two together are dynamite.
Excellent. Ron, how will the work at the center help organizations improve hiring, onboarding, training, and leadership development?
That's a mouthful. That's a lot there. First of all, I do think that our 5 core sciences that TTI has are absolutely crucial to both the hiring and the professional development world because they allow you to benchmark a job so that you're actually identifying what behaviors are required, what soft skills are required, what values or motivators may enhance or frankly get in the way. So once you have this understanding of a job, you can interview and overlay these two and cross over between the two and do a better job of isolating who you interview. And I didn't say who you hire. By the way, we are only one piece of the puzzle.
The assessments, the data, and unpacking that is one piece. Let's focus on the Mind Science Center. They take a series of 3 assessments. Tell us a little bit about each of those assessments. And then if we brought in a C-level executive that wanted to come to the center to better understand himself or herself, but leverage the separate assessments, but also the experience at the Mind Science Center.
Yeah, we use the same assessments. The debrief is a little different, and the debrief I'm going to call it a strategic debrief, because in the strategic debrief, not only are we sharing the findings that are coming out of your reports, we're digging a little deeper and we're finding out causes for some of this. Are there some issues that might emerge? Are there triggers that we observe in this strategic interview? Some issues that maybe getting in your way on a daily basis, either in your professional life or in your personal life. Those then are captured. And in many cases, when we run the initial EEG, we have the potential of also throwing in some of these questions and issues just to get a baseline of where you are on a continuum. Once we have that data, the next step, again, these are all personalized, but there are 3 major components that each get customized, so it fits all. For example, we will work with people to, based on the fact that I don't think most of us recognize that you really can't multitask. You can switch tasks, and with age, it takes longer to switch tasks than when you're young. You can switch tasks faster when you're younger. But at any rate, we teach people to be able to, when you're triggered, to have some abilities to alter what you're thinking about and in the process eliminate the trigger. So if I'm thinking about A, I can't deal with B. And one of the best ways to do that is to teach you some slow-paced breathing activities. So if I can get you to concentrate on your breathing patterns, what you were concerned about actually goes away, and it'll get you to a better place. The same thing is true with some meditation that we actually teach.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the team member, the gentleman that walked me through the focused Dustin. He was awesome. I felt like I had taken a relaxation pill. It was just he just did a great job, Dustin. So, Ron, what individuals or professionals or organizations should consider coming to the Mind Science Center?
It's a very good question, and I'm going to answer it in the following way. You do have to interview with us before you become a client. And we are kind, but we're also looking for your motivation. We've had to turn down some people that are so excited about learning what we do and have no intention of changing. I'm too old to spend my time with just teaching people. I want to make a difference. And so if your goal is to learn, I really can give you all the books you need and the material you need, but I cannot spend our time and your time helping you just learn and be satisfied that you learned something without changing behaviors and without being all you can be. So we're looking for people that want to be more than what they are right now, that they really want to grow professionally. And I think that interview helps us both explain what we're going to do for you and what you're willing to dedicate the energies toward. Are you committed to doing something like this? Once that relationship is built and the trust is built that you understand our role, we understand your role, the commitments being made, contracts are signed, and then you are on a path for 6 to 8 weeks to really make some changes that will require time every day. Maybe 10, 15 minutes at the beginning, closer to an hour toward the end, where you're doing some things that will ultimately lead to a statement I'm going to share with you. We always come in when you run the whole core program, you do a post EEG so we can see the data change. And recently a gentleman came in and he said, I know we need to run the post. I'm excited to see the post, but I can tell you right now, I'm different. I don't need to see the EEG to know that I have skills I didn't have. I have controls I didn't have. I'm in a better place. That was exciting.
That's powerful. After there's interest, the individual goes through the interview, and it's thumbs up from both of you. And can this be mid-level managers, VPs, C-level? Unpack for us a little bit about frontline. If there's an employee that really has demonstrated excellence and is on a fast career path, can it be frontline, mid-level, VPs, C-level?
I really think it can be all of the above. It comes back to motivation again. And you can come here in two manners. You can come as an individual who really is committed to it. You can have a corporation that commits their team to the whole team is going to go through this. And then we treat that differently. And you actually have some group debriefs that occur because your entire C-suite or something is going through it together. So we do the individual as well as the group dynamics in that scenario. And it also can be people who are referred. We would like you to do this before we fire you. That's my D coming out. I'm just stating it a little clearer than it probably should be. But at any rate, we have some people that will point out, much like a wife would point out to a husband that you have some things maybe you could work on.
Being married for 35 years, I know that.
So it really could be any of the above. And I find it exciting because I think we all are on some continuum where unless you've arrived, to nirvana, we all could improve.
That's really helpful. Ron, we've talked about your journey as a professor, then transitioning in 2010 to the Vice President of Research and Development at Target Training International, launching the Mind Science Center. I'd like to pivot now to my lane, which is the science of sales, leadership, and human behavior. How can sales professionals apply your research to drive stronger performance amongst their sales team?
I don't think there's anything more powerful than being in an interaction and having what I would call the third eye available to you. Many of us, we're not even aware of our own behavior in an interaction, let alone reactions that are taking place around us. The third eye concept allows you to see both of those things. You gain a level of awareness that you previously didn't have about your own behaviors, and that goes beyond just behaviors and motivators. It gets into nonverbals, and it gets into reading people that most of us just really desperately need help in gaining that insight.
Interesting. I've worked with Carol Mettenbrink on several client engagements, and every time I'm with her and she's training, be it live or via Zoom, I pick up another kernel, so being self-aware, taking for me these assessments every 18 months, doing a debrief, being honest and open to constructive feedback. But the one thing that resonates with me that Carol said, it takes energy to be someone you're not. Really, the limited understanding I had of the true Doug self based around the construct of DISC has really helped me grow and learn. Ron, what are some common misconceptions sales leaders have about DISC or emotional intelligence assessments?
Probably the first one is that they think it's woo-woo or it doesn't have a scientific basis. And as an academic, I would admit that I entered into this reluctantly myself. If I had not personally had experience with this as an academic, I think I would have written it off because I would have looked at the literature, and the literature at that point in particular was deficit. And I would have said, yeah, there are too many holes. I can't embrace this. I did embrace it out of need because I was failing. And as a result, then I added, and I think I've joined the ranks of people that are adding scientific evidence to this concept. So that's the first thing. The second one is harder, and that is you have to admit that you need to grow. And I don't know how to instill that in a person. I hope you don't have to be rock bottom before you actually realize you need help. But we all are on that continuum. We need help to get to the next level.
Interesting. Ron, you've studied quite a bit on cognitive bias and how it shows up in decision making. What advice would you give to sales leaders looking to minimize its effects?
Okay, a flood of ideas. First of all, I think we need to realize that about 95% of our decisions are made prior to you opening your mouth. In other words, my data would show that there is a catalyst that's really immediately responding with an emotion. And that emotion is occurring at about 1/8 of a second. You do not have a cognitive thought until 1/3 of a second. In other words, you've already made the decision before you thought about it.
Wow.
And about 95% of the times, the emotion will correspond to the final decision. So what I'm suggesting here is A, recognize what I just said. B, be quiet long enough to actually think. And don't use knee-jerk reactions. Contemplate, stop and say, my initial reaction is this. Was it a bias? Is it based on real facts? Can I defend it?
Excellent. Ron, what trends do you see shaping the future of behavioral science? First part of that question, and then its role in business over the next couple of years. You've got AI, deep learning, machine learning. So again, what trends do you see shaping the future of behavioral science and its role in sales and business?
I think that the role of technology as a whole, and AI, I'll group into that, but I want to group it larger in terms of technology. I'm excited about the technology interface in this world in particular that you're talking about, because we're going to be able to actually hook people up and they're going to have more immediate feedback that is unbiased and that is actually based on real data coming to the individual so that they can actually practice and learn in an environment. It's sort of like, well, many of us have Fitbits. Imagine a Fitbit on steroids. So you move the Fitbit to literally having the ability to see your brain on a real-time basis, and that you can make modifications as you see that intensity go off scale or the directionality being contrary to the decisions that need to be made. And so we're going to be learning new levels of self-awareness and self-control because of the use of technology.
Interesting. So, Ron, last question before we get into my favorite part, which is the rapid fire bestsellers blitz. But last question, if a company wanted to become truly science driven in their talent development, where should they start?
With you.
Right
And I
answer.
say that because Target Training International is the warehouse of all of the products. We do work, we'll go direct with a large corporation, and in some settings we have some individuals, but the vast majority of our work are through what we're calling value-added associates, which are people who have had proper training and knowledge of what we do, and they are the boots on the ground. They're the ones that are making it happen. You are the one that's making it happen.
Excellent. All right, we're going to morph into the rapid fire, the Bestsellers Podcast Blitz. 10 questions, one word response or a short phrase. Are you ready, Dr. Ron?
Let's try it.
All right, what's one word your colleagues would use to describe you?
Rambunctious.
Disc factor you personally relate to most?
A DC conflict.
Dominance and compliance. Most surprising thing you've learned about the human brain?
That we really are strong about what we don't like.
If you weren't a behavioral scientist, what career would you pursue?
Astronaut.
Coffee, tea, or brain food of choice while researching?
Coffee.
Favorite part of working at TTI?
New ideas and great people.
Best advice you've ever received?
Stop and think.
Favorite Arizona getaway outside the lab?
Sedona.
What's your personal mission these days?
Make a difference.
Favorite brain-related book or documentary?
I really enjoyed Suggestible You by Eric Vance. Suggestible You really highlighted the fact that you probably aren't aware of where your decisions are coming from.
Excellent. Well, our guest today on the Bestsellers podcast has been Dr. Ron Bonnstetter. Dr. Ron, affectionately known, is the VP, Vice President of Research and Development at Target Training International in Scottsdale. Dr. Ron, if any of my listeners want to get in touch with you, any of your research book, where should they go?
Well, of course, we're all on LinkedIn, but don't hesitate to look up our website and it's all one word smashed together, mindsciencecenter.com.
The mindsciencecenter.com, an unbelievable place to learn about yourself with Dr. Ron and his team of incredibly passionate brain research and disc experts. Thanks, Dr. Ron, and thank you to our guests. Check us out on the Bestsellers podcast. Carpe diem. If you made it all the way here, thank you for listening to the Bestsellers podcast, your ultimate destination for winning sales strategy. We hope you loved this episode. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on your favorite podcast platform to never miss an episode. See you on the next one.